Okay, picture this. Have you ever walked away from an argument feeling just completely drained? You realize you spent, an hour fighting over who should take out the trash, but deep down you know, it wasn't actually about the trash at all? Well, welcome to this explainer on conflict and communication. Today our goal is to peel back the layers and reveal the hidden structure of conflict. We're going to help you stop arguing over those surface issues and start understanding what's really going on beneath all that noise.
Right, so let's dive right into this. Why exactly does conflict feel so uniquely exhausting? It's because your brain is literally doing double duty. It's trying to solve a practical problem, like, say, a delayed project at work, and a relationship problem, like feeling disrespected, at the exact same time. And here's the catch. If you only focus on the practical issue, you completely miss the emotional signal.
And this perfectly illustrates what we call the surface illusion. Think of an argument like a display at an old market stall. The literal words you're saying to each other, those are just the shiny, polished apples sitting neatly on top. But the actual tension, that's the heavy, tangled, grinding machinery hidden underneath. The real conflict is everything happening way below the surface.
So let's set our anchor definition for today. Conflict isn't just a simple disagreement. It's a collision between meaning, identity, and stakes. At its most basic level, conflict is actually mechanical. Imagine two people trying to walk through a really narrow doorway at the exact same time. They might be perfectly polite about it, but the doorway only fits one person. Scarcity, whether that's limited time, trust, or room for compromise, creates friction when two realities just can't both win.
When that friction hits, the emotional reactions that follow are honestly just signals. A great way to think about this is like a smoke alarm. The alarm is piercingly loud, sure, but the noise itself isn't the fire, right? It's just pointing to a deeper threat underneath. If you just stand there arguing with the noise of the alarm, telling the other person, hey, you shouldn't be so upset, you're completely missing the actual fire.
Because here's the thing, people don't respond directly to facts or events. They respond to their interpretation of those facts. You and a colleague could look at the exact same literal event, but you're going to form completely different hidden interpretations in your minds. You'll instantly ask yourself, wait, what does this mean for my status? Or what does this mean for my sense of belonging? You aren't actually fighting about the event itself. You're fighting about what that event reveals.
Which leads us to this absolutely crucial quote. When someone feels threatened, they stop optimizing for truth and start optimizing for self-protection. Think about a hand pulling away from a hot stove. That hand isn't trying to stick around and understand the exact temperature of the stove, right? It just doesn't want to get burned. And that's exactly why. In a conflict, people become so rigid and start interrupting more. They're simply trying to protect themselves.
And this is where the breakdown happens. We often think of communication as just speaking clearly, but actually, it's a massive translation problem. You might speak a perfectly clear message out into the world, but the listener reconstructs it using their own mood, their history, their current threat level. What they actually hear might be a jagged, messy version of what you said. The message you sent and the message they reconstructed are almost never the same thing.
To break that down a bit, every single message you send carries three invisible layers. First, content, the literal words. Second, a relationship signal, which basically means how I see you. And third, a coordination signal, meaning what action I want next. Misunderstandings live right in the gap between these layers. You might send a coordination signal like, hey, we need to hurry, but the listener, who's defending against a perceived relationship threat, hears, you think I'm incompetent.
Now, what's really interesting here is how we can map out exactly why these translation failures happen. Think about these common failure modes. When someone says, hey, that's not what I meant, you've got an intent versus impact mismatch. Or if entirely neutral words suddenly seem hostile to you, you're experiencing a mismatch of trust. Communication failures are structural. It's literally like speaking through a bad microphone. No matter how clearly you articulate, if the relationship system is strained, the sound is going to come out completely distorted.
So, how on earth do we fix this bad microphone? Well, the fix is repair, and the goal of repair is simply shrinking the gap between what was meant and what was experienced. Repair isn't magic, and it is definitely not about persuading the other person that you were right all along. It's simply about realignment. It's about finally touching the right layer of the conversation.
And this brings us to the paradox of the apology. A weak apology, the one, I'm sorry you felt that way, almost always fails because it's trapped in self-defense. A truly strong apology does three very specific things. It acknowledges the impact, it names the specific harm, and, this is absolutely crucial, it signals a different future pattern. When you signal that the future will be predictably different, the other person's nervous system actually relaxes.
But We really need to make a very clear distinction between repair and resolution, because they are absolutely not the same thing. Think of repair as a band-aid on a broken chain. It means the relationship can hold together safely without the conversation causing any more damage. Resolution, on the other hand, is like a completed puzzle. It means the underlying issue is completely settled. You can beautifully repair a conflict without actually resolving the foundational disagreement. And the scale analogy brilliantly illustrates why. Better communication doesn't magically erase friction. It's really just like making the invisible weights on a scale visible. Once you can actually see the weights, you finally understand what's being prioritized, like balancing one person's need for speed against another's need for precision. The scale still has to tip one way or the other, but now you see those incompatible trade-offs clearly.
Which brings us to a somewhat counterintuitive reality. Good communication is not the same as happy resolution. Sometimes the absolute best, most honest conversation doesn't produce harmony at all. Instead, it produces a really tough trade-off or a very clear boundary. And you know what? That is actually a success, because you've discovered the limits of the system instead of just endlessly fighting the smoke alarm.
So, this is the mindset of a conflict-smart communicator. It's a fundamental shift from constantly reacting to all that messy surface drama to actually reading the hidden gears and structure beneath the argument. When you can see the difference between what was said, what it meant, and what it did inside the relationship, you save immense amounts of energy. You start responding with precision instead of just sheer volume.
So the next time you find yourself right in the middle of a tense disagreement, I want you to stop asking, "How do I win this?" and instead challenge yourself with this final question: what outcome am I actually trying to produce? It is time we stop treating communication as some kind of verbal performance and start using it as an intentional intervention. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. You now have a really solid foundation to navigate conflict. See you next time.